Hey guys, what's going on? It's the DreamItAlive show. I'm your host, Ash Kumra, co-founder of DreamItAlive.com. DreamItAlive.com is a global community that guides you to create your dream life with visualization tools, dream boards, and helpful personal development content. So why not take that next step, become the best version of yourself? Check out DreamItAlive.com. Hey, it's free, so even a better incentive to check it out. So today's guest is someone who I have really been interested in talking to. Fashion just is everywhere. Fashion, whether you're a fashionista or whether you're wearing clothes to be a hipster or whether you're just someone who's just, hey, I like to just look good. It all revolves around your whole fashion and the whole style that's within you. And today's guest is Kimberly Stone. She's the founder of POSHGLAM, and she is just a hustler. I mean, she is in over 143 countries. She's been featured in Washington Post, Daily Candy, In Style, Uptown, MSN, Fox, Upstart Business. She's been listed by Black Enterprise's top 10 women of power under 40. And she's also kind of coined this term called Fashion 3.0, which I really want to kind of better understand and see kind of what we as entrepreneurs and dreamers and, future and current fashion creators could learn from. So, Kim also, what I like about her journey is that she's really self-made. It's a really cool self-made story on how you can reach things and how you can just stick to your gut and just, move forward. Fashion is also something that just constantly changes. I mean, I'm in the quote unquote entrepreneurship scene, and I'm currently seeing so many of these, people that are in the scene and, that are making moves, that are doing things. And it's really, really cool because, fashion is, I think it's affecting more things than just traditional tech, traditional entrepreneurship, traditional things that are just, changing the way we are making things happen. And one thing I'm also really curious about when I talk to Kim is, how can entrepreneurs and technologists and people that are servicing the fashion industry, what are some trends that we could look into? A great example is I recently met an entrepreneur in the Los Angeles area, and she's a designer, and she actually said to me, hey, you know what, like I really have this idea where all these buyers who want to get products made, and there's all these, factories that can make those products, or I'm not saying buyers, the creators of the fashion lines, but going to each factory is a laborious process. So how do you handle that? And her thing allows you to just kind of connect with different factories and different molders and different areas of the fashion industry all on this one site. And it's really cool. It's like saves you time, and she makes a little fee off that. Think of like an Angie's List type model. That's just so fascinating because to a normal person, you might not realize how much fashion product is created in these local cities such as Los Angeles, New York, and rising cities like Vegas. It's a $100 million to $1 billion industry. And then, just innovation within the bigger fashion companies is something that's very, very, very pervasive. And I really am kind of curious to hear more from Kimberly on that as well. But lastly, I mean, regardless of being in the fashion world or not being in the fashion world, to be someone who is in a business, built it from scratch, is distributed in over 143 countries, and to have a formula for success, I think this could apply to any dreamer out there, any entrepreneur who's working on their venture, or any, person who has a brand, whether it is fashion or not. And it should be pretty cool to dive into that. So I'm really, really excited, and stay tuned for our interview with Kimberly Stone in 1 second. So Kimberly, how you doing?
Hi, guys.
How's it going?
Great. How are you? Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you great. Thanks for jumping on the show.
Thanks. I'm honored to interview.
Well, Kimberly, tell us about your journey to creating POSHGLAM. Like, how did you create it?
Oh, great question. I was actually living on 42nd Street in New York. I don't know if you know anything about New York City, but 42nd Street is really touristy. And I always wanted to go to fashion school. Like, I made my own clothes in high school. I won Best Dressed in high school. And I always wanted to go to fashion school. So I sewed when I was really young. Like, when I was 4 years old, I made my first outfit because my mother was getting a dress made for a wedding she was going to be in. And I went to the fabric store with her, and, like, she was getting fabric, and to keep me kind of content and situated, she let me go, like, play around in the remnant bin, which is, like, the leftover fabric at the fabric store. And you can find, like, really cool remnants if you're at the fabric store, and, like, someone may buy, like, the entire bolt of a really expensive fabric, but what's left over, they'll heavily discount it, and then, like, you know, if you shop in the remnant bin, you can find some really cool fabric. So anyway, she let me pick out something out of the remnant bin, and we went home, and, like, I made something, and every time people would come over, they'd ask me to put on the outfit that I made because she had to sit there with me with the needle and thread and watch me as a 4-year-old go in and out of the fabric with the needle and thread and, like, tell her how to help me make the outfit. So that was my first experience sewing, and I just continued to make things as I got older. When I was in high school, or actually when I was in elementary school, now that I remember, I was making about $100 a week selling T-shirts and hair barrettes to friends. And that was, like, the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. And then as I got older, I wanted to go to fashion school, but, you know, it's just not as, like, prestigious, and it's not as utilitarian or substantial to go to school for fashion just because you can't really rely on it as much. So initially when I went to school, my goal was to go to school for economics and to get a 1-year associate's degree in fashion from Parsons after I finished with my undergraduate degree. I was at school at Spelman College studying economics and trying to tie it into fashion, how the economy relates to fashion, and, you know, because sourcing and economics have a lot to do with, like, what's available. For instance, Stuart Weitzman made a cork shoe during one of the world wars because of the sourcing component of fashion and not being able to get the materials he needed. That was the emergence of the cork shoe years ago, and it's just interesting how economics plays a huge role in fashion. So anyway, I studied economics initially, and then I started studying with a professor from FIT that was local that taught me about slopers and grading and sewing, and I started making handbags with her, and, like, that's kind of how I dabbled in fashion. But then I later traveled to New York to attend Baruch for undergraduate business just to kind of, like, immerse myself a little bit more in the business arena. So I attended Baruch College then, and I lived on 42nd Street because I was a student and I didn't know the city very well. So 42nd Street was very centrally located. And, you know, I started noticing with 42nd Street being so touristy and being a melting pot, I started noticing a lot of different trends. And it was when the dot-com boom started to happen, and I started realizing that the web was a great way to promote and catalyze emergent brands from a grassroots standpoint. And I touch on this a little bit in my Women 2.0 interview about how I started POSHGLAM in college, but I was attending Baruch at the time and then later transferred to NYU. And by the time I transferred to NYU, I was living in Harlem. So just the immersion of being in New York and really seeing how trends evolve from, like, tourist to, like, you know, street fashion to, you know, the way that designer fashion can trickle down. For instance, like a Chanel bag may trickle down and become something, the trend may start something from a grassroots standpoint or an avant-garde indie designer standpoint. Something may be inspired by a Chanel bag, but to that same token and testament, an avant-garde designer can easily influence, you know, a high-end designer that's looking for a fresh take on a new idea. So I just really liked the way that the established designers were able to set the tone for luxury designs and emergent designers, and the emergent designers that were also indie or avant-garde could kind of influence established luxury or designer favorites that we all know.
Yeah.
So I started POSHGLAM with the hopes of creating a communal space that would, work as a catalyst for growing emergent brands from a fashion marketing standpoint.
Well, a couple things I really love to dive a little further on this, and I appreciate you sharing that story, is you mentioned living on 42nd Street, and you mentioned being in the hustle bustle of New York City, and as a guy from California, I mean, I've been to New York, I've been to the fashion scene quite a bit. I'm actually really into hip hop, and for me, I love the whole hip hop influence that New York has brought out there. My question to you is how important was the location of being where you are to influence what you decided to create?
Well, it's very important. I feel like had I not been in New York, I wouldn't have been influenced by the rapid changing trends, because street fashion in New York is so, it fluctuates a lot because a lot of people ride the train. So unless you ride the train, you don't get a full, well-rounded idea of like what's trending and what's, beginning to burgeon in terms of trends. Like, for instance, you may think that red bags are big, but until you get on the train and you see everything from the established designer red bag all the way down to the new handmade red bag that may have been made by someone from, Pratt for a school project. Like, the trends tend to trickle down according to street fashion, utility, season, need, and, ultimately they start one place, but they grow depending upon the demand. Like, and obviously we all know supply and demand, but these trends, it may be something like a resurgence of a trend. Like, there's a book written by Gladwell and Malcolm Gladwell, and it's called The Tipping Point. And he touches on how hush puppies became so big. I don't know, have you read that book?
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Do you remember the part when he's speaking about how the city kids, like, people would lock themselves in their houses and, like, they wouldn't leave because the streets in New York were so bad, but then, like, the city kids end up wearing hush puppies, like vintage hush puppies out?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and, like, that's not really something that you can predict, but it happens, and then you can just capitalize off of it. And because of the internet, viral marketing and, influencer relations have become so big that you can kind of, like, it's easy to do trending, whether it's surfing a hashtag on Twitter, whether it's looking on lookbook.nu. Are you familiar with lookbook.nu?
I am, actually.
Yeah, like, there are a lot of people that their whole lifestyle revolves around, dressing the part, and their jobs require that they look a certain way. And there are other people that are free spirits that want to set the tone. And to me, that's style versus fashion. Style is something that applies to lifestyle and maybe your work, your occupation, and then fashion's more experimental and more expressive.
Yep. I love that. I want to go back to that hip hop question. So I have to admit, I guess I'm kind of I'm using you to selfishly answer my own hip hop fashion questions. I'm kind of curious. Let's just use hip hop as an example, because this applies to other areas of other types of fashion too. What role does certain trends? So for hip hop music, right? I read that Daymond John, he took FUBU to a new level. One of the reasons why is because from where he was from, the whole Queensbridge area, guys like LL and Mobb Deep and Nas and all these rappers were really starting to merge really well, and they kind of took FUBU to a whole new level in terms of promotions and things like that. My question to you is, if someone else wants to create a fashion line and they want to pick up on certain trends that can help boost their type of fashion line, whether it's hip hop or whether it's something for hipsters or whether it's something very chic-y for women, how do you notice these trends? Because you must work with a lot of emerging fashion designers and things like that.
Let me touch on this. I'm a huge fan of Daymond John.
Okay.
We have a friend in common, and I have always been a fan of FUBU because he kind of gave a voice. He gave a voice to a whole sector of the industry that was underserved. Daymond John was smart enough to tap into a market that no other designer really was catering to in the same way, and expand upon his cultural ties to it. And I think that's what's important. Like I did a workshop for Columbia on authenticity and like curating. And I think when you're carving a niche, you really have to do an assessment of, have these people been catered to in any other way? And if you are reaching out to a particular audience, like how can you tie in culture and influence and understanding and different components that are going to speak to them in a communications type way that no one else can really speak to them? Because if you can find an underserved market that hasn't really been spoken to in a way that it resonates, you can really create something that sticks with them on a deeper level, just, you know, not necessarily just focusing too much on the falsetto, but really, you know, helping them use what you're creating as a form of self-expression. And I think everyone has been in situations where they felt artistically starved, and I think fashion is a great way to express yourself. And if you like a designer and it helps you express who you really are, it can tap into some artistic elements of your personality that can help you on a day-to-day basis just be who you really are and really, you know, use fashion as a form of self-expression.
Well, you talk about emerging markets, emerging trends. I mean, what you've done with POSHGLAM, you clearly have done something at the time when you launched it when there wasn't a lot of other companies doing what you're doing. How did you grow? Like, you're in like 143 countries. I got that press release you sent me today. And yeah, I'm just like, this is crazy. Like, how did you do that?
Well, I mean, I think it's easy online. I mean, with us growing, it was because we really, you know, you have to care. Like, everything in life is a passion project when it comes to entrepreneurship, and I think you know that. It's a passion project. You have to care. You know, you do your best to answer every email. You do your best to relate to people and not just to be opportunistic about just doing whatever, you know, you feel is right in the moment, but really cater to people in a way where they feel like you care. I mean, I answer random emails all the time from people that email me that I don't know, but, you know, what happens is everyone ends up being your PR in that sense, where you're shaping sentiment with every reaction, every email, meaning, you know, if someone random emails you and you don't get back to them, they're going to go tell their friends, like, oh, I emailed that person and they didn't even get back to me. But if someone random emails you and you get back to them and you care and you relate to them, they'll go and tell their friends, oh, yeah, I emailed her. I didn't think she was going to answer, you know, and then it creates a dialogue and people will support you because, you know, it was a passion project for you, and the fact that you responded or that you brought something to the table and you were humble and you really approached it with a great deal of interest will really make people, you know, think differently. They start to feel like, you know, that you have a more humanistic quality. I think CEOs that get too far removed from their audience or from their customers become disconnected, and they begin to be resented because they take each individual person for granted. I think when you build a relationship on a one-on-one basis and you know how to relate to people from an interpersonal standpoint, typically you don't have to do as much marketing.
You know what? If anyone who's hearing this interview is, let's say you're limited on time and you can hear just one aspect of this interview, what she just said is so golden, guys and girls. What she said is so awesome. You need to be your core product. You need to be that core customer. I will name you so many people that have done this. Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, Elon Musk, Kimberly Stone. All these people are people that, A, were a core customer, B, they saw an opportunity because as a customer, they found ways that weren't satisfying them, so they then, C, created a business around it. I do the same thing. I walk, talk, and preach DreamItAlive.com, and I talk about dream boards and visualization. Guess what? I look at my dream board every day. Guess what? I do visualization stuff every day. So I can wholeheartedly, authentically promote what I am doing as an example. So anyone, this is just please hear that part again, and I hope you rehear this interview, and that's why we archive these interviews. And that's so cool that you said that, Kimberly. I want to jump.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I want to jump into something that's really cool that you coined, or you might have used from someone else, which is Fashion 3.0. What the heck is Fashion 3.0?
Have you ever seen the movie Artificial Intelligence by Steven Spielberg?
Oh, yes. Bomb movie.
It doesn't truly exist. Fashion 3.0 doesn't really exist. It's kind of like something we're all reaching for, okay? So Fashion 3.0, it's kind of like there's 2.0 right now. Everyone's doing this, everyone's doing that.
What is 2.0?
As early adapters.
What is 2.0?
2.0 is more so I would say the engagement aspect, whereas we were once in a realm where people weren't really connecting, but because of social, people are now friends with brands. Every brand has a humanistic quality. So let's say, before Gucci was just putting out bags, whatever people thought, was what they thought, and they spent a lot of money on advertising. But now we're in a realm that if Gucci puts out a bag and everybody hates it, everybody knows. Everything is very two-pronged, where it's a two-way conversation now.
Okay. So, going back to the hip-hop fashion line, would you say an example is if, let's say, FUBU decides to come up with something and they do something which is hey, for every shirt you buy, we're going to match it with something in some underserved area or some type of marketing like that, kind of like what Tom's is doing with that whole one-to-one, or is this something totally different?
I saw that FUBU is doing hair care products, which I think is genius. And just to touch on this quickly, the fashion industry is built on a revolt, okay? The whole industry is about a revolution, a revolt, change. If you think about Yves Saint Laurent, he was put out of Christian Dior's couturier, his haute couture design firm. When Christian Dior was doing haute couture, Yves Saint Laurent was kicked out. His whole design background is revolved around hiring African American models when no one else was doing it. He said very nice things about Iman. Putting women in suits when only men were wearing suits and women were wearing dresses, aside from Katharine Hepburn. I think fashion is about a revolt a lot of times, so that's why if you can carve a niche and really cater to people that aren't being served, you can really grow and it can be disruptive. If Daymond John decides to do something new, I know Daymond John through an advisor, and I know J. Alexander Martin through an advisor as well. I've had dinner with J. Alexander Martin, and the day that Chris Rock got on the Academy Awards and they asked him, they were like, Chris, what are you wearing? Chris Rock is so funny. He's so cool. He was like, this suit is FUBU. And oh my God, I went wild. I called J. Alexander Martin. I was like, Chris Rock just shouted out FUBU at the Academy Awards, and he laughed his ass off. So I think ultimately it's all about really, not everybody's good at finding a niche and sticking to it, and not every niche can afford the product. But if you can really present something to the market that's disruptive in the fashion industry, especially since the whole industry is built on a revolt, you can do really well.
Okay. Well, speaking of that aspiring fashion designer or the next FUBU, tell us about a fashion designer or someone of that sort that you have helped through your company or you individually, and, kind of like a case study, someone that, if I bring this up, you just have a smile on your face and they just represented what it takes to make that dream come true.
Well, I helped a designer, Salim Johans. Her brand is SD Johans. She was placed in Elle on Elle.com. I pitched her through a Fluxury, which is a site that I use to consult when people have questions for me. And I use a Fluxury, AFFLUXURY, is a consultancy. So anything someone asks me to do that's outside the realm of POSHGLAM, I'll use a Fluxury, and then I'll make it happen with my resources and my connections. So I just sent her out to the press, and a friend, at Elle picked up the story and compared her to Brian Atwood, which is unheard of for an emergent designer. Brian Atwood has now been acquired by Jones Group. He's doing really well. And he studied as an apprentice, I think under Versace. I can't remember who it was. I'd have to do my research. But I sent her information over to Elle, and her brand is SD Johans, Yohans, and there's an Elle placement online if you Google it. But they said such nice things about her, and she showed at, I believe it may have been Paris Fashion Week, or it may have been Milan Fashion Week recently. And she's, I helped her cross the pond. She was in the UK, and she went to a local school there. I think it was Central St. Martin's, and she needed press in the U.S. So I helped her garner this placement in Elle magazine, and it did really well. She got tons of clients and comments, and it really put her on the map as her first major press placement. And it's something that I was able to secure rather easily because she had such great designs.
That's awesome. Well, what traits did she have? I mean, besides having a killer fashion line, like what are those entrepreneur, hustler, dream, make it happen type traits that you just saw in her? You're like, you know what, this person's going to rise no matter whether I'm there or not.
Well, I think she had talent, though. I think sometimes, persistence meets talent can solve the problems of the world. She had a lot of talent, and I think when you're good at what you do, when you're persistent, people are okay with it. It's when you're not good at what you do and you shove it down people's throats that they resent you. So I think I wasn't really aggressive. I didn't hard pitch her, but I think when people have talent, it really sets them apart. So as an entrepreneur, if you can find your talent and really push it, at the end of the day, people forget that you're marketing to them.
How do you develop that talent?
I think it's knowing what you're good at, strengths and weaknesses. Once you identify your strengths, find out what makes you happy and go with it.
Okay. No, that's fair enough. Well, we actually have a couple callers that have called in, so I'm going to just dive into some of these questions. Valerie has a question for you, and she wanted to know, hey, Kimberly, I'm really curious to know, what are your thoughts on where women's fashion is heading, specifically for the corporate executive under 40?
Wow. I'm going to tell you something. I'm really impressed with Michael Kors. If you do your research on Michael Kors, he was kind of like a regular brand, then he became an everyday brand. I have a friend that worked on the Victoria's Secret account when it went from a specialty brand, meaning people were only buying lingerie like for holidays. He turned it into an everyday brand. So when it comes to corporate fashion, I really love Michael Kors. He's publicly traded, and I feel like he's really nailed it because he took something that was working and kind of grew it to where it became a mainstream brand that is acceptable. And I think even I really like Rachel Roy for weekend wear. I haven't really worn her, for professional in a professional setting, but I like Rachel Roy. I also like Theory. I think Theory has mastered the well-made suit for women. So I think the direction it's going in, it's classic silhouettes, well-made garments. I think a lot of the silhouettes are trickling down, like the pencil skirt. You can go to, let's say, like a TJ Maxx if you just gotten a job and couldn't afford to really stock up on work clothes. I think a TJ Maxx or a Marshalls is great for things that are acceptable. They're usually designer items, and you can get them to wear to work. And then if you have the money, once you've gotten a little bit into your career and you can afford it, you can upgrade to maybe a Theory or an Ellie Tahari.
Awesome. Well, thank you for answering that. Sabrina has a question, and she wanted to know, hey, Kimberly, I'm actually looking to get into the cosmetics area of fashion. What are some brands you feel I should learn from?
She's looking to make cosmetics. Okay, I would definitely say, depending upon what area she's looking to go into, I think Estee Lauder is doing some disruptive things. I'm impressed that Estee Lauder went from mainly it went from catering to one nationality to really broadening their approach to color palettes and colors, and expanding their coverage to include Asians and African Americans. If you notice, Estee Lauder is really well-rounded, and they own a lot of the major cosmetic brands. So if you're looking to start your own cosmetic brand, I would pay attention to some of the smaller companies, I would say NARS is doing really well. I really like Laura Mercier. I am a huge fan of Bobbi Brown. I think Bobbi Brown is very inclusive to include Kate Upton in her ad campaigns, being a plus-size model and tying her in that capacity. If you're looking for a more artistry line, I like Makeup Forever. I think Makeup Forever has done a great job in social media. Let's see, who else am I a huge fan of? Maybe she should consider something more middle of the road, like Chanel. I wear their foundation. I mean, obviously, she can't really compete on a broader scale with them, but she can pay attention to the more innovative things they're doing, because a lot of the makeup lines that are established have their older customers, but then they're doing a lot of new things to attract newer customers. For instance, the Tyra Beauty is now coming out. She recently favorited us on Twitter.
Nice.
Because we were really impressed with her beauty line. She's doing something that I believe is much like Mary Kay that requires network marketing. And she has some really cool products like a face spritz to keep your makeup on and a highlighter. So I'm impressed with the way Tyra has taken on a Mary Kay type persona and developed a beauty line with direct marketing involved.
You know, I actually am going to jump in and ask you a question before. We have 2 more questions, at least at the moment. I'm really fascinated with, network marketing, MLM, direct distribution companies. Just ironically, or if it's coincidentally, a lot of people that create dream boards and, want to attain that dream life are actually people that work for brands like Herbalife, Mary Kay, and all these people, because they set their goals up on these boards, which is what we provide, and then they use that to help inspire them to just push hard. I guess my question for you is, what's your take on these MLM type companies in the fashion world? I mean, you mentioned Tyra, and there's the classic Mary Kay, but do you see this rising?
I think we all have an element of MLM. Every business has to make money. I think every business has to make money, so every business is watching their bottom line. I think you have to have to start an MLM, you have to have a huge marketing budget to gain brand equity so that the people pushing your products don't have to do all the marketing for you. So I think it works with someone like Tyra that has the capacity to really market Tyra outside of the MLM, where the products are just, being delivered in terms of logistics by people. I think it makes sense. So from a logistical standpoint, if that person that has a great product and they're showing it to you, and there's already a lot of marketing and science behind the product, I think it works because the brand is doing all the marketing. But I think when the person is too heavily relied upon to do all of the marketing, I think it fails. Now, I think there's another company, Stella & Dot, that's doing it with jewelry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. They're amazing, actually. I just read a case study on them recently. They're moving upwards and onwards. I appreciate that answer. Stephanie has a question, and she says, "Hey, I work for a major fashion line, and I am thinking of doing my own thing. I have a Chinese background, and I'm really looking at both China and India because of the large population of under 45-year-olds. What traits do you feel I could take from working in the American fashion world and take to international countries?" I guess she's trying to ask, what could she use from her working out here to getting started in China and India?
I don't know if she's planning to move there, but I know SCAD has a Hong Kong campus. I think every metropolis has their own fashion culture. I would instruct her to maybe look at going back to school at maybe like an art school locally, for instance, like Hong Kong SCAD. I don't know if that's I'm sure they have like continuing education even programs where she can pick things up that aren't necessarily a new degree. But I think sometimes being in school and being able to experiment while you're in school can really make the difference between success and failure. So maybe there's a local school that she can take classes from remotely if she doesn't want to move, but she needs to find a way to really tap into the already existing culture, to understand it, and to penetrate the market, because there's so many affluent people in Asia that the propensity to do well is there, but she really needs to know, if it's plausible, but is it possible? How is she going to go about everything?
Okay.
So I think she should do a lot of research on the culture and find a mentor and find out how other people are doing it. See if there's a formula for success that she can find. Like if she can at least find a mentor to give her a formula for success and stick to the formula.
I like this next question just because it's something that I can kind of relate to. Michelle has a question, and she said, "I'm an up-and-coming fashion vlogger, and just for the sake of, just so this could help everyone, I won't reveal what it is. My question is how can I use my fashion vlogging to get the attention of fashion brands?" And I guess what she's asking is what are brands such as Revlon or L'Oreal, and what are they looking for when sponsoring these fashion vloggers like on YouTube? Because I'm starting to see a lot of them coming out there. I just heard recently that, Maybelline has just gave like a 6-figure deal to this up-and-coming vlogger. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, I mean, blogging is like the new, consensus shaper. Great leaders. I think it was Martin Luther King, that said we should be molders of consensus and not followers of consensus, meaning, bloggers are great for brands because they can shape what people think and they're more humanistic. It's not the same as just giving it to an editor who's non-biased. The mainstream press is supposed to be non-biased, so ultimately they're supposed to approach things from a very non-biased standpoint, but consumer press is biased, meaning like they have a certain opinion, they feel a certain way, and they go with it. So I think if they can slant the bias in their favor, that's what they need from bloggers. They need a blogger that feels a certain way to evangelize their brand. So she needs to really work on her voice, like what is her voice saying? And then, maybe if she really wants to launch a blog, she should hire a professional, like a PR, to be a third party to pitch her to the mainstream press, like the Teen Vogue and the Washington Post of the world, to write about her blog. And then once she gets some press for her blog, then she can just create a back and forth. Like once the mainstream media, acknowledges her blog, then she has her own voice, and she can use her own voice as a vehicle to promote the brands she really likes. And just be honest. I mean, there was an interview that just still cracks me up to this day where Yves Saint Laurent was changed to Saint Laurent, touching on Saint Laurent again, but the name was changed to Saint Laurent. And one of the bloggers went to Paris Fashion Week and saw the show. I believe it was fall, winter 2013, if I'm correct, and they had changed everything. And one of the bloggers got so upset with Saint Laurent that referred to them as All Saints Laurent, which means they were kind of touching on the dark, sardonic tone of All Saints, which is not really a compliment to Yves Saint Laurent being who he is. So, I mean, I think once you put it out there and you're honest, be prepared to accept criticism, but I think that's what really resonates with brands is it's almost like a test environment. They know what people really like and what they don't like as soon as the bloggers test something and they give feedback when they're honest. And when people know, what people don't like from a brand standpoint, it may hurt, but it really puts them in a position where you're part of market intelligence. If you're honest and you say what you really think on your blog and they find out, they can make better decisions in the future. So, I mean, of course, laudable reviews are great, but honesty is even better.
Okay, cool. Well, I have one last question before we get off the interview, and thank you again for staying a little longer. My question to you is, what do you do to stay grounded? Like, how do you focus on your big goals and dreams? I'm not talking about, making the bottom line go higher next month. I'm talking about what do you do to dream?
Well, to stay grounded with my dreams, you said?
Yeah, how do you stay grounded with your, how do you stay grounded? Two questions. How do you stay grounded, and what do you do to kind of work on your big dreams and goals?
Well, I think you have to balance, being aspirational and being grounded. I think for every aspirational thought or idea that you have to have something that grounds you and keeps you close to who you really are, whether it's religion or, something that you love doing. Sometimes, I have a lot of hobby ideas that aren't really businesses, they're just hobbies. Sometimes I'll go and work on a hobby that's a business idea instead of working on POSHGLAM because it may be something I want to launch later. And it's humbling to know that it's not anything, it's not going anywhere right now, but it's something I may be working on. I'm working on a handbag line, and I've done all these designs and so from time to time, I've been working on it for years, but from time to time, one of my designs will get picked up by another designer, and it's it's humbling. I designed a shoe that ended up being really similar to one that Tom Ford did, and also really another one that was really similar to Miuccia Prada shoe. And it's humbling because it's I'm not at their point of success in design. I mean, what am I going to do? Even if I sent it to someone in Milan and they happened to show it to her and that's how it got there, which I'm not saying it did, it's humbling because, that's just the nature of the business. I mean, the fashion industry is trends, and ripping off trends or keeping things going, and everyone influences everything. The fashion industry could be inspired. I once saw a Louis Vuitton trash bag. I don't know. I'd have to find it online and show it to you, but everything inspires fashion. I think we all get stuck in these creation ruts, but when you get to a point to where your creativity stifled or you're artistically starved, you just go and find another hobby that really excites you, and you can go back to your main business.
That's awesome. Well,
Thanks.
You're welcome. Before we adjourn this interview, where can people find you? What should people know about the latest and greatest with POSHGLAM? This is your soundbite promo opportunity.
Well, POSHGLAM, we're evolving. We've had a lot of really fun articles that didn't even really touch on fashion, like relationship articles. They've done well. People can find me on Twitter at POSHGLAM, POSHGLAM. And the best way to keep in touch with me is via email, and my email address is on my website, Kimberly@POSHGLAM.com.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. And on that note, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. You're inspiring a lot of awesome fashion designers, dreamers, and entrepreneurs, even myself. I've learned so much from this interview. Thank you for what you're doing, and
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks for the opportunity. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks. Bye.